I knew something was going on, and I shared with him earlier when his name kept popping up. And I became very aware of the fact that he had some serious groupies here. And I won't name names, Barbara, and say who I won't. Part of his... And so I thought, who is this character? I've heard a little bit, through the ethers, the name's somewhat familiar. So I did a little research. Anybody here familiar with the phrase, holy guacamole? Well, when my 9-year-old niece at the time, first time we took her into a Chuck E. Cheese here, her reaction was, holy guacamole. Well, my inner 9-year-old, when I looked up this man's website, was exactly that. Holy guacamole. Spirit is alive and well, expressing itself through this vehicle. Would you agree? Yeah. How many have had the privilege of hearing him speak before? Yeah. Well, I listened to and I watched several of his YouTube videos, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But I'm going to share a little bit more about him, if I may. Do a little bragging that we have in here this morning. Well, he has been frequently referred to as a Renaissance man, but I discovered something. If you look up the definition of Renaissance man, it reads, this section has been revised. Please visit Raymont Anderson. No joke! No joke! I'm telling you, is a lifelong learner with a passion for self-development, personal transformation, transmutation, and self-awakening. He lives his bliss as a teacher, mentor, speaker, minister, and so much more. Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson is a person whose bio cannot effectively catalog all that he is or what all he has done or doing. I was just exhausted reading the list of his accomplishments and things he's involved with. He's been a teacher since the mid-'80s and has been teaching ever since. Some of the disciplines he has taught have been such things as visual arts, American Sign Language, martial arts, public speaking, spirituality, and religion. As an American Sign Language performing artist, he created not one, but 2 different performing companies. He has authored not one, but 2 different books. Books 3, 4, and 5 are in the works. He is the father of 5 amazing young men, and I can't believe this, but the grandfather of 5 beautiful grandchildren. I don't know how that's just numerically possible. Just no. In June of 2011, he resigned from his full-time job as a high school teacher in Maryland, as a professor at Bowie State University, Bowie, and as a full-time interpreter, in order to begin his right and divine livelihood as a full-time path. He is an ordained interfaith, interspiritual, and non-denominational New Thought minister, as well as a licensed religious science practitioner. He's currently serving on the board of the Center for Spiritual Living, D.C. as the board president. He is also in the process of becoming a licensed Centers for Spiritual Living minister. He's a certified holistic life coach, a Reiki master, a visual artist in the mediums of drawing, painting, digital photography, teacher of martial arts, oracle card and angel card intuitive guide, a practicing shaman, and believe this or not, he's a Jedi master. He serves with the Jedi of the Noble Order, of which I want to find out more about. That just sounds interesting. Wow, without any further ado, please help me welcome the Reverend Dr. Clark Kent, rather. I mean, Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. Thank you.
So how is everyone today?
Great.
Good. So, I have to start off with a minor confession, so please forgive me. But I am a mother yucker. Now, I'm not sure why you're laughing, but well, let me backtrack. Let me explain. So the title for today is "You Can't Yuck My Yum." Now, a friend of mine introduced me to this term that he heard some high school students or some college students, at a table at the mall talking about, "Dude, why are you trying to yuck my yum?" And it clicked in his head because this person was trying to ruin the other person's day. So the reason I say that I am, or I have been, a mother yucker is because when I was a child, Thanksgiving was the time that my family would gather together and the majority of them would eat chitlins, of which my mother loves, to the degree that I was like, oh, no, I'm sorry, Lois, I love you, but no. And she tackled me and forced a handful of them down my gullet, which didn't do anything except make me not like them anymore. But at some point I got to this realization that just because every time my mother would make a plate, I would sit there at the table and look at what she's eating. Mom, why are you really... And I realized that that's her plate. Why am I trying to govern what's on her plate? And how many times do we, not us spiritual folks, but we humans, attempt to control or dictate or manipulate our way into someone else's plate? Everybody's going to have whatever they choose to have on their plate. But we try to put our little 2 cents in. You know you really shouldn't be eating that. You probably want to get a little less of that. Here, try this. I made this. I'm vegan. I don't care. It's bacon. Eat it. Like we do a lot of this trying to get our hands into other people's pots rather than focusing on, am I staying in my own lane? Am I focused on driving my car? Or am I worried about the car beside me that's not using turn signals? Am I using them? I'm worried about the car over there not obeying the speed limit, but am I obeying the speed limit? Am I staying in my car, driving my vehicle, going to where I'm going, while blessing those who are going where they are going? But I'm driving mine. See, not too long ago, back in my former Christian days, we did this talk about heaven. And heaven was the place to be. Like there was parties and there's streets of gold and crystal. There was all that stuff. So heaven was like this place to be. Like, it's beautiful. But people didn't want to go. Like I didn't understand that at funerals, people were like, oh Lord, she gone. Shouldn't we be celebrating? Like, shouldn't we be doing what they do in New Orleans and be playing music and having, rejoicing because we know that this person is now in a place of everlasting joy. Like joy without end. See, I've never been to Disney World yet, but I'm going. But I know that when I go, I know that Mickey, Minnie, Pluto, and Goofy are going to have to drag me out of there, handcuffed, with a taser, because I'm trying to move in. I already know. I've seen photos. I've heard stories. Harry Potter land is there. They just built a Star Wars land. I know I'm trying to move in. I ain't never been there, but I know. That kind of joy is temporary. Have you ever had a decadent chocolate cake that you know that eventually there's that last bite? And you savor it. And look forward to the next time. Because we know, being in this human body, that if the chocolate cake lasted forever, sooner or later you'd get tired of the chocolate cake. Because it's this temporal, human, frailty kind of enjoyment of it that we know it's not meant to be long-lasting. But there's this thing called heaven that's forever. Joy that lasts forever. But see, the great thing about our philosophy and our teaching is we understand. Anybody not familiar with the Science of Mind magazine? Okay, we're all familiar. So at the front of the Science of Mind magazine, there's the We Believe. And see, one of them, We Believe number 4, says, we believe that heaven is within us and that we experience it to the degree that we become conscious of it. We experience heaven to the degree that we become conscious of it. Now, what that says to me is, when I first got into this, I'm like, well, what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. And it was very theoretical. And there's this idea that you can experience or be in the midst of what we call a painful experience, sadness, And yet, if your foundation is grounded in what source is, what spirit is, then joy can be in the midst of this. For example, my second oldest brother, Leslie, made his transition last year. Now, I've been to roughly somewhere about 1,300 funerals in my entire life. I've been to far more funerals than I care to even remotely count. So I've been there. And I've been, snot, and I've been there. And it's my second oldest brother, and I go up there, and my family wants me to be the one to do the eulogy and stuff because you're a reverend, and I said no. Because I know what kind of minister they want. They want tambourine shouting, holy guacamole in the name of Jesus. That's what they want. That's not me. It's not authentic. While I'm standing there, I find myself able to comfort other family members and friends with a feeling that I didn't really recognize from prior experience. And what I'm saying is that while in the state of I'm grieving and feeling a sense of sadness, I was still filled with joy. To the degree that someone asked me something about, you are going to do the eulogy, right? And I said no, and I explained why, and caught myself speaking New Thought philosophy to them and said, I'll explain later. But the gist of it was, I understand that my brother is not this that's in the box. I understand that at this present moment, he is everywhere. Prior to that, he was limited in a physical form to the confines of this body. But now, he is back with that which all is, complete and total oneness. He understands things now that he didn't understand prior to leaving that body. And I felt joy. And then going through this, it made me start thinking about all these times in my life when I yuck my own yum. When do I kick my blessings to the curb? When do I let things, circumstances, situations come to me and I engage in the tango of, I really don't like the news right now and I'm going to be mad and angry because I don't, and I'm engaging, I am choosing. W.C. Fields said, you do realize that you don't have to attend to every argument that someone invites you to. Just because you get an invitation doesn't mean you have to go. So when someone says something on the news, do I have to accept the invitation to engage in lower consciousness and say, oh yeah, the world's going to hell in a handbasket? I've accepted the invitation. Oh wow, look, RSVP. Ray, please attend to the next congressional something where we are going to destroy all of the forestry and... Okay, fine, I'll go. Knowing that it is not in my highest and best? Or do I see the news and see what's on the news and see what's going on in the world and take it as my opportunity to go into prayer? As my invitation to ground myself in what I know is truth. To say that I don't care what office you hold, I don't care how we are connected by blood or DNA, you don't have the right to yuck my yum. Because I understand that that which has created and is all things and in all things and with all things and literally is showing up as all things. And that's right here, right now, in this breath. Right here, right now, in the silence and the still moment of expansion of the heart, and there's a pause. And contraction, and there's a pause. And in that moment, there is absolute peace. In the Chinese system of Tai Chi and Qigong, there's this thing called Wei Wu Wei. Active inactivity, or the act of doing without doing. It is simply being still and recognizing sometimes in stillness, you get more done. In simply and far more gets done. And see, last year, have to admit, confessional again. Well, let me go back. Many years ago, I used to be addicted to depression, self-hatred, whole bunch of other things. And at one point, while at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh getting my first degree in visual arts, after having seen a family member kill his mother's boyfriend, I spiraled down this deep, dark, dank place of misery. And it caused me to go into having suicidal ideations again. Long story short, counselor at the school saw that I was going through stuff. I wrote a note and said, I can't handle this anymore, and I was talking about something else. He took it as a suicide threat. The dean, the school counselor, and an administrative assistant tried to stop me in the front of the school. Somebody outside saw 3 white men and 1 black guy, called the police, because clearly the black guy is the thief. 7 police officers show up, and then there's a fight. I knocked 3 police officers out, and ended up being hospitalized for 9 days because they thought I wanted to kill myself. Now, one of the things I found during this time was being in a room forced to be by yourself and with yourself gives you a little bit of time to think. And I started to really focus on, what do I want my life to look like? This is 1984, 85. So I'm 18, 19 years old. Don't know what I want with my life. Don't know what being an adult really means. I don't know what I've had teachers tell me what I couldn't do. My goal was graduate high school, go to Hollywood, and do movie special effects. I'm of the era of the Star Wars generation. And my art teacher said, you want to do what? You don't have the talent. Teacher in school who yucked my yum, and I bought into it. I took the invitation and ran with it and attended every party that he offered, telling me what I could not do. So I didn't do it. I believed it. So I sideswiped and followed a different path because I loved art. I can't do what you, because you're a teacher. You know. If anybody knows, you know. So I gave up that dream and followed a different one. How I ended up at the Art Institute. But what I'm saying is I got to this place where I had to really assess, who am I and what do I want? And it forced me to confront a lot of anger, a lot of stuff. Because I grew up in a household where there were drugs and abuse and just a lot of pain. And then I find eventually this philosophy and this teaching. And it's like, you do know, there's this thing called freedom. And not freedom like you think you know freedom, but I'm talking about freedom. Freedom not just from the people who abuse you, not just freedom from the situations that knock you down, but I'm talking about freedom from your own mind when your own mind pops up and says, remember what your teacher said to you 10 years later. The voice of the teacher is still what's playing in my mind because it took roots. And this teaching said, I am like a weed killer, that I can go into the one mind and find the places where I am using law, using the principle of creation to create the very thing I don't want. So let me undo and now start to plant in the garden of my mind what I want to grow. Freedom. To the degree where I can now enjoy or find reason to enjoy even in the midst of something uncomfortable. Last summer I had coffee with a young lady from China and we're having great conversation about meditation and martial arts and the teaching and stuff. And we go our separate ways, and while I'm walking down Constitution Avenue in DC, a truck with 5 young men drive by, and out of the window I hear, nigger. I didn't even register. It's nice weather, I'm minding my business. And I hear it again. Now it's louder because the truck is right beside me. Now it's right there, and I hear it again, and I realize, it's 2016, broad daylight. And then they get a red light and they stop at the light. And I stop. Because my very first thought was, this is why I'm not an X-Man. Because I would use my telekinetic abilities and flip the truck. Thank goodness I'm not. Because that was my first thought. My first thought was from the human self, from the ego self, from you are trying to hurt me, so let me do something to stop you from hurting me. Versus saying, ha ha ha, Just because you give me the invitation that says, hello, N-word, come on down and enjoy and engage in this consciousness that says you are less than. And I paused and said, there's only one power and one presence. God, the good omnipotent, right here, right now. They don't know the truth of who and what they are, so I'm going to know it for them. And I prayed, not just for them, but I prayed for myself. And I prayed for the people who were near me, who were traumatized, running up to me, asking me, sir, are you okay? Oh, I can't believe that. Oh, hey. It's all good. It's all good. Because on any number of days, given whatever, people are going to think or say or look at, and I don't have to engage in it. I don't have to accept the invitation to let someone rob me of my joy. 2 Sundays ago, it was Easter. And I said last Sunday when I was at the Unity in Bowie, as a reminder that there are times when we get so lost even in the teaching that we don't make this practical. We keep the teaching theoretical. And there has to come a time when we question and ask ourselves, if I'm going to say I believe that heaven is within and to the degree of my consciousness and recognition I experience it, then I have to ask myself, what is heaven for me? What does that mean to me? Easter. We talk about Easter and Jesus and Yeshua and resurrection and blah, 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 blah. Yes, but that's every day. Why do we save this one day and exalt it as this all-powerful reminder when every day is a reminder to put into the tomb what does not serve, and that in 3 days we will be resurrected anew? So watching the news and put it in the grave, I don't need that. Because I know that in the grave it will be transformed and transmogrified and transcended so that I, the true I that I am, steps forward. But we have to be willing to practice it. We have to be willing to live, to walk the walk and talk the talk. We must, even when it's challenging to do so. So there's this idea that prior to the resurrection and whatnot, Jesus, it says in the Bible that Jesus ascended this mountain. He ascended this high mountain and took with him 3 of the disciples. And many people in traditional Christianity question, well, why just those 3 disciples? And they say because these were the 3 most spiritual disciples. Now the funny thing is, Charles Fillmore in 12 Powers of Man says that the 12 powers, so each of the disciples has a power. Jesus took Peter, John, and James. According to Charles Fillmore, faith, love, and order is what Jesus took with him as he ascended the mountain. He took faith, he took love, and he took order. And Jesus was transmogrified. And we do workshops and we take classes to be transformed, but we don't really push forward to the envelope of being transmogrified, but being transfigured. Because ultimately that's the I am transfigured. And what that means simply is you know that you know that you know who and what you are. In that moment, Jesus knew, I am. I've been transfigured to know. There's another story in the Bible, many chapters earlier, where this guy named Moses, you may have heard of him, also ascends this mountain and is given this law. And it says in the Old Testament that when he came back down from the mountain, he shined so brightly that the other people were like, dude, where's the dimmer switch? So what Moses did was covered himself with a veil so that he would not shine so brightly so as to blind the people who were dull, who were not shining as brightly. When do we dim our own lights for the sake of others? When do we yuck our own yums lest someone says, you're too happy? I used to work at the school called Arundel, and a couple of teachers, and I used to always get to school early. And I would, walk through the halls, and I'm whistling, and I'm singing supercalifragilistic, long before the students are there. This is how I set my day. It's my thing. And it got to the point where my students, if they were in the other side of the building, they would specifically come to my side of the building first, my hallway, just to, I got to see Anderson today. Because if I see Anderson and Anderson gives me some laughter or Anderson smiles at me, something, I know I'm going to have a good day. And some of the teachers at some point came up to me and said, "Why are you so happy? You're too happy." I've been called a number of things in my life. I've been called stupid and ugly, and I've been called I've never had someone call me too happy. But what I realized was there are going to be people who are going to see your joy and be threatened by it. They're going to see your well so full and overflowing, your cup so full and overflowing that you are drinking from your saucer, and they're not going to like it. And we are going to have to determine, do we let them rob us of this? Do we let them yuck our yum? Or do we stand in our authenticity knowing, dude, I'm God. I am the I am in human form. I am on some level connected to all that is beauty and magnificence, and joy itself is in this form. Joy itself is in me, moving with me, supporting me, flowing through me, and showing up as me. You can't undo this. Anything this glorious can't be undone. Are we willing to stand in that truth? Because I know that as I changed from this teaching, my whole life experience changed. Every corner of it. My home life, my family life, the degree of friendships I have, my level of self-worth. And I know that if a group of us get together of one accord and one mind, where there are two or more in the flesh, two or more ideas being shared, two or more joining in the one consciousness of all that is, that everything on the face of this planet that would yuck our yum, war, pestilence, disease, etc. We have a consciousness. Emma Curtis Hopkins says, there is no mixture of evil in my good. And for her, good and God are synonymous. There is no mixture of evil in God. Well, if God is all there is, then you are it. And if you are it, then there can be no mixture of evil in you either. God can't be sick. Do you identify that level of yourself that can't be sick? The level of yourself that cannot be poor, cannot be broken, cannot be anything that is not love itself, joy itself, magnificence itself. So that even in the midst of waking up with a sore back, but there is a part of me that is beyond this. And I am going to let that be what stays in the forefront of my mind. Sakyong Lipham, the leader of the Shambhala Buddhist tradition, says in his book, Ruling Your World, that the thought that stays in the forefront of your mind is the thought that governs your life. If the thought in the forefront of your mind, in your mind's eye, is I am that I am. I am magnificence, I am joy, I am peace, I am love, then everything that shows up contrary to that, you are able to speak a word of truth and cause it to fade and dissolve. That's why I say we can watch the news and use it as a prayer. It's a request from this country and other countries to pray. Because that's how powerful we are. What did Sue say today about the exact same power and presence that is in Yeshua the Christ is right here, present in each and every one of us? Are we doing the very same thing that he did? Seeing the lame and saying, you can walk. Seeing the blind and saying, you can see. Seeing the dead and saying, there is no death, there is only life. Are we willing to start tomorrow and say, all of my life is a yum? Because that's what I speak, that's what I live, that's what I command. And so it is.